Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. And today, for our 500th episode, we are being joined by the Rob Kosberg, author of Publish, Promote, and Profit, and the guru from Bestselling Publishing. Rob, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Paul. Good to be on with you, buddy.
Well, it's great to reconnect. I think the last time that we actually had the opportunity to talk was about 3 years ago at a conference that we were at. So it's nice to connect with you once again. And
wow, has it been that long?
It has. Time flies, doesn't it?
I guess it keeps marching on, man.
It does. Well, Rob, we're honored to have you, and we're looking forward to getting started with our questions. Are you ready?
Yes, shoot.
All right, sir. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
To finish as quickly as possible, because money loves speed. And if you want to make some money, if you want to make an impact, then you need to do it quickly. So as quickly as you can would be my suggestion.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we talked about a few years ago was how your company specifically can help people get their books out there quickly, within basically having them complete their work essentially within a few days to a week. And by a lot of that is by repurposing content, whether that's from online trainings or from webinars and courses. Tell us a little bit more about that process, because it really is a game changer.
Yeah, we do things several different ways depending on what the need of the client is. So, I'd say the majority of our clients are creating content from scratch. And so that's a very different process than somebody that has, let's say, like our mutual friend Taki Moore, is adept at doing webinars. And when we worked with him to create his book, he basically did it in 3 webinars. Now, just because you did 3 great webinars doesn't mean you have a book. I mean, there's a lot that's left to be done. There's connecting the dots, there's stories, they're making sure that the content has great context as well. So there's a lot involved with it, but somebody that has content can certainly repurpose that content to create a book. Someone that doesn't have content can certainly create it from scratch. So either way, it's something that can work.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that about Taki, because his book was one of my all-time favorite books. And when I talked with him about it, and he's basically telling me about the story about, we basically took that from webinars, repurposed it. I added a little bit of storytelling, and I was like, wow, how did you do that? Very simple answer, Rob Kosberg.
Yeah.
That's how it was.
Let's just say it wasn't easy, but because Taki does long webinars. So
yes, he does.
So we had like 9 hours of content, and there were lots of side tangents and other things that needed to be clipped and whatnot. But needless to say, and thank you for your compliment. The book came out fantastic, and I love the book also. So I am proud of the work that we all did on it.
Well, as I was telling you before we actually started recording this episode, you had a great impact in how we looked at our business, because we realized that for our business, for publishing, the coaching side really just wasn't making the biggest impact, because there's a lot of people that don't necessarily want to learn how to do this. They want to have you do it for them, and they're willing to pay a premium. So you were very influential when we made our change to focus on those done-for-you services, and also with repurposing content. As an example, we just helped a fertility coach become a best-selling author, and what we did was very similar to what you mentioned. We took the content from her online course, we extracted the audio, we had it transcribed, we had it edited, cleaned up, and polished, and we had her probably add about 20% new content, but most importantly, add in those stories to connect those concepts together.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that. I mean, you're making it sound easy, but it is not easy. I mean, I've done it enough to know. And so you're right about that. I think that you and I both know how hard it is to write a book. And if people are content creators, then they're probably sitting on a lot of content that can be repurposed. Now, that doesn't mean that it's easy to do. And so, I mean, both of our businesses, we have a lot of similarities in what we do. But I tell you what, it's not for the faint of heart. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I know you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot to do.
Well, yeah, and we talked several years ago. We were focused on that coaching side, and I think if we would have stayed on just that coaching, we wouldn't nearly have the success because it really, you have to realize you have to be able to pivot, and when those opportunities come up, with being able to repurpose content and be able to focus on that done for you side, and it's just as you mentioned, it's just embracing the grind and continue to work with our clients and making every launch better and better. And I know that's what you guys do as well.
Yeah, right. It's not good enough just to have an excellent book. It's not true that if you build a better mousetrap, they'll beat a path to your door. I think that's true on some occasions, but there's so much content being produced on Amazon and in the way of new books that it's not enough just to have great content. You really have to have a great strategy to launch it and to get your content out in front of your ideal client. And we do that obviously with our launches. Maybe similarly to you, we do paid advertising and social media, and we do massive press releases, and we also do guaranteed media. We have our own in-house PR firm. We book our clients. We have clients on TV almost every day of the week, all over the country, as well as podcasts, blogs, print, you name it. And this is, in some ways it's old-fashioned. In some ways this is what you got to do to get somebody's message out in a powerful way.
Well, and the thing is, it works when they're just realizing that you're not just focusing on the paid advertising, you're not just focusing on just the bestseller piece. When you're telling them, hey, that's just one part of this. The bestseller piece is what we do to leverage the other pieces. Same thing with doing the press release to celebrate their launch, and then connecting them with different radio shows or podcast hosts that you've built those relationships with, because those are all aspects of the traditional book launch that these traditional publishers just are not doing anymore.
Yeah, they're not. And I always hear from clients that have a big platform because look, if someone's listening right now that just wants a traditional publishing deal, which is not unusual at all, that's the first thing people think oftentimes when they don't know anything about the industry is they think, well, I just want, I need to get a traditional publishing deal. And let me just help you to save some time. If you don't have a massive platform, if you don't have a big email list, if you don't have a big Twitter following, et cetera, then don't even try because they're really only interested in working with people that can sell books. And this goes to the point that you just made a moment ago, Paul, and that is that traditional publishers don't market your book. They don't do the paid advertising and press releases, and what they do is they write you a check to sell the book. In other words, you become an employee, or as I like to say, an indentured servant, because if they wrote you a big check, they expect you to go to work, and you're under contractual obligation to get that book sold, and that becomes your job for the next year or two. And so, most people that really understand how the game works are avoiding traditional publishers unless the check is really large, like high six figures, low seven figures large. And I have friends that have gotten those kinds of checks, and I can't argue with them. I'm like, okay, 750,000. I would have been tempted to. I get it, but other than that, steer clear.
Yeah, I have the same view as well because the main thing is too, they're actually reaching out to people that have those followings. They're going out and looking at people that have large Facebook groups or have those large email lists that they're able to find out more information about. And that's what they're doing. They're seeking out those people that have those following, expecting them to advertise the book. I mean, it's amazing how this industry has
That's why
changed.
they're paying you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy.
100%. They're paying you to write the book. And I mean, they're paying you to sell the book and to sell it to your audience, people that already know, like you, and trust you. And unfortunately, it's obviously every now and again there's an idea or something that's really powerful that's new, but most of what's being written is, not necessarily new, but it's repurposed. It's our take on something. And I tell my clients, I'm like, look, that's important, but that is not enough for a traditional publisher to write you a big check. What they want is they want your audience. And if you don't have an audience, then well,
Yep.
you're better off without them.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, what do you feel is the hardest part these days about getting your book published?
About the getting it published part,
Yeah.
I would probably say, I don't know if this is a good answer for you, but I would say the actual getting the book completed
Mm-hmm.
is always the hardest part, like finishing it. Writers tend to be perfectionists, and so getting it finished is so hard for some people. That's why oftentimes it's good to use a company like mine or yours, and actually get it done by a professional, by an expert. When it comes to, once that part is done, then, when I think of publishing, let me put it this way to you. Maybe my answer seems a little all over the place, because when I think of publishing, Paul, I think of just, you know, you can get a $12 employee to push the buttons and make it live for sale. And that's not, that's not the way most people think of publishing. But, I think of publishing as that tiny element. It's everything around the publishing that matters. It's the design of your book. It's the actual title and hook of your book. It's the marketing of your book. And most people don't have a clue how to do those things successfully. And quite frankly, it behooves them to have somebody do it rather than, take on a full-time job and learn how to do it themselves. So I would say, publishing in the broad sense, I include writing the book. I include actually marketing the book as well. So I don't know if that's a fair answer, but that's my answer.
Well, you answered it perfectly because there's so many pieces. I mean, in my view, I always think the easiest part is either speaking the book out or getting it written, whichever format you're going to use. But the hardest part is always going to be that editing, that proofreading, that polish, and then from that point transition it to get formatted, the cover design and all that, because there's just so many little pieces. And I don't think anything in particular is difficult, but there's just so many tedious things. And if you screw one thing up, it can jack up the whole thing.
Yep. Yeah, it's certainly tedious if you're going to do it on your own. I mean, even if you're not going to use a company like ours, you need to hire an editor to put another set of eyes on it. You need to hire a proofreader to put another set of eyes on it. Somebody else needs to be looking at it, because you're going to have to look at the same words over and over and over again as you make changes. And unless you're willing to publish something that is very flawed, then you're going to have to, continue editing. And then the perfectionist in you comes out, and you're like, when is it ever finished? And it tends not to be. So you need to get other sets of eyes on your work to get it completed and get it done well.
Yeah, and invest in the editing. It's one of the best investments that you can make. Don't self edit. Have someone, have a professional, have somebody edit that book, because if not, you're going to be in for a world of hurt.
Yep. Yep. Totally agree.
Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launches that has worked well.
I'd say our best strategy is old school, in the sense that um, when you know the basics, and the basics are, you've created something that hooks your ideal client. You have a cover that is attractive. You now only need to put that in front of the right audience to get people to bite on the hook, right? I grew up fishing in Central Florida, fishing for bass. And you don't fish for bass with a ball of bread. You fish with bass with a worm or a shiner. And if put that shiner in a place where there are bass, you are going to catch a bass. And the same is true with with your book and your audience. So we do a lot of paid advertising for our clients, but we want to make sure that the book has a great title, it's got a great hook to it, it's got a great cover, beautifully done. And then when that is put in front of the audience that already wants that thing, well, guess what? Our work is now done for us, right? Um, so so this is, I guess, a combination of things. I can't, nor do I think it would be helpful for me to just give you some like cool little trick. The truth of the matter, the trick is in a great hook, a great title, a great cover, and then that just being put in front of the right audience, and then you're good. You're good to go.
Excellent. Well, speaking of books, I'd like to know what is your favorite book and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
My favorite book is hard to say. How about if I start with my favorite author? And that may change from time to time, but my favorite author in general is C.S. Lewis. Man, I just love C.S. Lewis. Now, I tend to be a spiritual person anyway, but C.S. Lewis wrote, he wrote fiction, science fiction, obviously spiritual books, etc. But I love to read C.S. Lewis because what he does, I think, better than anybody, or at least as well as anybody, is he helps you to look at an idea or a concept in a way that perhaps you've never looked at it before, and that's even if you have been looking at it and thinking about it and studying it forever. So I love C.S. Lewis, and I love that part of I love that aspect to C.S. Lewis. Love his stuff. So, I don't know if that's not as specific as a single book, but man, I'm going through volumes. I read his stuff every day. I'm on a super big kick of C.S. Lewis right now. So, ask me in a year and it may be a different answer, but it's him right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, I want to ask you your favorite C.S. Lewis book, but let me ask you about the current one that you're reading.
So, I just got finished reading his book. Is it The Case for Glory? Oh, what is it? I think it's The Case for Glory or The Weight of Glory. The Weight of Glory. And oh my gosh, I just love that. It's actually much of his stuff is compilation material, which is also, really interesting because what we've spent a good length of time talking about how you can take your content and repurpose it for other things. Coincidentally, that's exactly what C.S. Lewis has done. Like The Weight of Glory is compilation material. I'm actually reading Mere Christianity right now, which is actually each what you might call chapter is a radio, not interview, but a radio speech that he gave during World War II in the early 40s, when of course Great Britain was constantly under the German bombers, and I mean we know the history of that. I mean at any time that country could have fallen had it not been for Winston Churchill and men like C.S. Lewis. So man, that's what I'm reading right now, and I love it. You don't have to be a Christian to actually enjoy the book, because the book doesn't even really speak to a Christian audience. It gets into that more in the latter parts of it, which is very interesting.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
You know, um, since I was a kid, and this is something that has come to my mind right at the moment, so I'll consider this my favorite quote. But since I was a kid, I have enjoyed thinking about what I want to do with my life, and how I want to have a life that has meaning. And a kid meaning like perhaps teenager. And the quote by Thoreau, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." I memorized that quote as a young teenager, and it's always stood out to me as a warning, you know, of what to avoid. So there you go. Hopefully that doesn't end on too depressing a note, but I don't want to be part of the mass of men that lead a life of quiet desperation. So I remember that quote and I consider it with what I do with my life.
No, I think that one's an excellent choice. Well, Rob, I want to thank you for being a guest on our show and for celebrating our 500th episode. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Great being with you on the show and honored to do your 500th episode. I would say the best place is publishpromoteprofit.com. Someone can get a free copy of my book at publishpromoteprofit.com. They just got to pay a small shipping charge to get it shipped to them, but they get it for a third of, you know, even just the shipping cost is far less than you'd pay for it on Amazon. So that's probably the best place to start with us and see what we do.
Rob, thank you once again for being on our show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thanks, my friend. You too.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.